welcome to the very first episode of The Lamp Doc. I'm your host, Mike McDonald. I'm sitting here with my producer, Tim Duff. We call him Timmy One Take.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Really excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited
to start this podcast. This is our very first episode, and we have very honored to have Jim Planette here, who's a legend amongst gaffers. Probably one of the longest careers of a gaffer in the industry. And he's your second generation gaffer, aren't you? Your father was a gaffer. So yeah, Jim, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, of course, I'm Jim Planette, and I've been a member of Local 728 for almost 54 years now. And my father was a gaffer who started in 1919, and he became a gaffer rather quickly because the business was expanding so quickly, and he worked for 50 years. So together we have more than 100 years in the motion picture industry. And I started, working on sets and being a rigger, and I actually became a gaffer pretty quickly as well. It took me just 3 or 4 years to become a gaffer. And I, thankfully, in the beginning, worked with cameramen that didn't know as much as I did. Mm-hmm. And now the MO is a young DP and an old gaffer, which suits me just fine.
Right.
And I've been, everybody's career is based a lot on luck.
Yeah.
You need to be able to deliver, but you need to be able to be offered the really exciting and interesting and challenging jobs. And I've been extremely lucky. And so I started out being a gaffer in the early 70s. And in 1974, I was the gaffer on Young Frankenstein, right, which was just a absolute confluence of luck, of meeting the right people. And it was one of the great highlights of my career. Worked with Jerry Hirschfeld, a New York DP who was very, very smart and very sharp, and from whom I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And so it was really, it really was wonderful to start out with something as memorable and still as Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, that must have been a really fun set, huh?
It was. It was.
It's one of my all-time favorites, that movie.
There's some wonderful things on YouTube of outtakes from Young Frankenstein where the cast just breaks up because Marty Feldman was so unbelievably funny. And sometimes the camera operator would be laughing so hard that you could see the camera shaking, and they'd have to cut. So it was really something.
So yeah, that propelled you into a lot of other great movies. I mean, one of them notably E.T.
E.T. in 1981. Which even in 1981, they were looking for a more experienced gaffer because Alan Davia was doing his first feature. And someone recommended me, and he came to see me when I was working on Cannery Row at MGM and asked me if I wanted to do this little movie called This Boy's Life. And so I said, sure, that sounds fun. And so it had a different title until it was released because Steven Spielberg didn't want anyone to get the idea of what it was about.
Interesting.
But most of us realized while we were shooting that this was a special movie. And it turned out, of course, to be quite special.
Right.
And we shot a scene at the very end, which kind of would help it go to a sequel. But then Steven decided he didn't want to do a sequel because that would just be for the money, and he was really happy with the original, and he didn't want to just make more money out of it. And it was a negative pickup by Universal, and Steven signed the completion bond. And so when things were going kind of slow, he'd say, guys, we got to get going. I'm going to lose my furniture. Which, of course, was not true.
Not true.
Of course. But it really, and we used to see dailies at Steven's house up off of Coldwater Canyon.
Well, that's fun.
And that was really great because his screening room was better than the one at the studio.
Right.
I can imagine.
Well, so that must have been another key moment in your career, finishing this film and seeing the success, and propelled you even more as an A-list gaffer to be called.
Yes, and again, I was very lucky. I have no idea who recommended me, but I certainly thank them. But I've done some really fun movies and some difficult ones. I worked with John Alonzo early on and did 3 or 4 movies, or 4 or 5 with him. And John Toll was the camera operator, first an assistant, then a camera operator for John Alonzo. And then I got this phone call from John Toll, and he said, I said, I'm doing a movie in Canada, and if I were to offer it to you, I'm not offering it to you, but if I were, would you say yes? I said, of course, John. So he said, I'll call you back. So he called me back, and it turned out that he had talked to another gaffer, but he felt that gaffer didn't have enough experience, and he needed a more experienced gaffer. So I got hired for Legends of the Fall.
Right, another great book.
And, an amazing experience in Canada at the foot of the Canadian Rockies, which when I got there, I realized what breathtaking was.
Yeah.
Because you see that, you go, my gosh. And so we did that, and then we did Braveheart. And we had a final screening of Braveheart at Paramount Studios. And as we walked out, the producer turned to John and he said, amazing, John, you're going to win back-to-back Oscars. And that's exactly what he did. He won for Legends, and then he won for Braveheart.
Both beautiful, beautiful films.
Yes, absolutely.
One of my favorites is Braveheart. I love that film. It's really
that was the longest shooting schedule I've ever done. It was 108 days of shooting.
Really?
Yeah. So in Scotland and Ireland, 6 weeks of shooting in Scotland and 16 weeks in Ireland.
So back then, were you able to bring any of your crew, or it was just you and DP?
No. Yeah.
And so that must have been challenging.
No, it was, but I had a wonderful British crew in Scotland and an Irish crew in Ireland, and what was kind of interesting is the crew in Scotland from Britain were working on a flat, and they gave them a little bit more than normal because they said, we're liable to work a Saturday or two. Well, we worked every Saturday. But when we got to Ireland, they had a union, and so we worked 5-day weeks, and I mean, unions are so essential to not only safety, but working conditions and payment, and of course, pension and health and welfare. But also when I started doing commercials, they were all non-union. So if you did only commercials, you had no money going to your pension and nothing to your health care. So now they're union, almost all of them.
Yeah.
But the rates aren't quite as high.
Right.
But it's still better because you still get your coverage.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it's and there needs to be checks and balances, like you said, especially in this type of an industry where it's push, and safety has become more of a concern these days. You've done a lot of. Let's give a list of the films that you've done, just a few.
Well, some of my favorites. We talked about E.T. and Young Frankenstein. Fisher King is another amazing film. Free Willy, that was a classic when I was growing up. Legends of the Fall, we mentioned. Braveheart, Twister, Traffic, Magnolia, The Artist, the Ocean 11 films. An interesting question.
$1 Million Arm.
Yep, $1 Million Arm.
Wow.
There's
incredible
plenty
career.
More. Yeah.
I don't think anyone's had such a colorful career I've ever met. I've always been a connoisseur of gaffers. And I just love your work, and you're really a gentleman. This is where he gets his name, Gentleman Jim, as everyone calls him. Also the best dressed gaffer in the industry, arguably.
It's not that difficult.
How do you think that you've been able to capture, besides being lucky, at one point, there has to be something else that stands out with you. You think it's your ability to sort of be a really good lighting caddy for your DPs, or is it your agent, or what do you think is really kind of kept you doing high-level film production and being called for?
I have no idea. Truly. I would answer you honestly, but I don't. I don't have an agent. Yeah. One of the things that's kind of, I think, interesting is I remember working on a movie, and this second unit key grip told me that he'd done a lot of work with Steven Soderbergh, and Steven Soderbergh was going to be shooting his next movie himself, and he's interviewing gaffers. I said, I knew who Steven Soderbergh was. And then a short time after that, I got this phone call to go in for an interview with Steven Soderbergh. And we were working nights, so I could go in the morning and meet him. And And we were getting along, and everything was fine. The production manager was there, Fred Brose, and the assistant director, Greg Jacobs. And at one point, Steven said, do you have a style? So I said, I'd never thought of that before. And somehow something popped into my head. This friend of mine had taught a class at the Sherwood Oaks Experimental College called Cinema Minima. And I said, yes, Cinema Minima. And he said, you're my guy. And that's how I got the job on Traffic. And even though I had never thought of it that way before, that was my style. I feel that if you have all the equipment in the world, anybody could do it. The challenge is doing it without all the equipment in the world.
Right.
And I once had a rigging gaffer bring an 80-foot Condor when I had asked for a 60. And I said, I don't understand. Well, just in case. I said, no. I asked for 60. That's what I want. He said, well, this is a $50 million movie. I said, pretend it's a $5 million movie. And because at the end, something may come up that you hadn't anticipated, and then you've run out of money.
Right.
And so I really tried it, and it's gotten me in some trouble with DPs, but I try not to order anything more than I think we need. And make do. There was one time we were doing some added shooting on a movie, and the DP said, we need some more light on the backing. And we were using every single light that I'd ordered. And so I got a reflector from the grips, and one of the lights going in the window hit this reflector and bounced the light back onto the backing. And he said, yeah, great, okay, good, ready.
Let's shoot.
Let's shoot. That's a little too close. And then after Traffic, Steven was going to do Ocean's 11, and he told me that he was going to have Harris Savidi shoot it. I said, oh, he's a fine DP. That's great, And then a little while later, Steven called me, and he said he didn't think it would be fair to Harris to shoot it because of his experience now as a DP, so he was going to shoot it. Did I want to work on it? And I said, oh, of course, that'd be great. And it was a wonderful experience. All the Ocean's movies, Ocean's 12, where we traveled all over the world, and it was almost like the producer saying, thank you so much for your hard work on Ocean's 11. Now you get to do 12.
Right.
Because it was just unbelievable. Lake Como and Sicily and Amsterdam, and it was really great.
It must have been a really fun cast to work with, too. They seemed really easygoing and funny.
Well, I've had people say, oh, that must have been a nightmare with all those big stars. And I said, if the number one guy on the call sheet, George Clooney, is not a jerk, nobody else can be.
Right.
But that's really true. And if he were a jerk, everybody would just, mimic him, and be jerks. So,
how does it affect your job when you're working with a director who's also, the cinematographer? I mean, that must kind of alter the dynamics a little bit, or what's that experience like compared to traditionally what it's set up to be?
In the case of Steven, because it was his first time as a DP, he just let me do the lighting. And then if he saw something he wanted it a little bit different, we would make it a little bit different. But most of the time it was just, I did the lighting and he took care of the camera. I mean, not only was he the director of photography, he was one of the operators, and so he was setting up the shots. And so it worked really well as a team that way.
He gave you a lot more freedom.
That's right. I try to, no, I don't try. I only work with DPs that could do it without me, and I could do it without them, but together we'll do it better. And
That's great philosophy.
It just, that's the way it works the best for me. I kind of give them something to look at, and then they say, oh, that's great, or, maybe we should do this and this, and there we go. But everything moves faster. They have more time to deal with setting up the shots and working with the director that way. And then the lighting is being done, and they take a look, and they either say yes or, add this or take this away or something. But generally, it really works as a great team that way. When you collaborate, which is the joy of making movies, everybody's collaborating, including the director. Everybody has ideas, and pretty soon you don't know whose idea it was because they all just kind of meld together into something good.
Right.
That's the joy of it, I think, actually.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Maybe there's a particular moment that stands out in your career that you wanted to take us back to. Maybe it was something that was horrifying, or maybe there was some real fun stuff that ever happened. What sticks out in your head?
Oh, well, over 50 years, there's many things that stick out.
Right.
You mentioned that I was a gaffer on Twister. I was the second gaffer on Twister. The DP decided that he didn't want to be involved in that movie anymore. And so not only did he quit, but he insisted that the entire grip and lighting and camera crew quit as well.
Wow.
Which I thought was somewhat unreasonable because maybe he didn't need the money, but maybe some of the crew did. And so they brought a whole new crew of gaffer and grips, and everybody came in new. And the first day I got to this location, the second unit DP was shooting, and I watched how Jan de Bont explained what he wanted for the next shot. And then he went back to his trailer, and I saw everybody standing around like, I don't know just what he meant. And so I went to Jan's trailer. I'd never even met him before. And I knocked on the door, and I said, Jan, the crew doesn't really understand what you're asking for. You need to come back. He said, oh, okay. Came back and explained it better. And they go, oh, okay, good. But I think that must have been happening during the first part of the movie. And so Jack Green came in as the DP, and I was the gaffer. And it was a really amazing film to work on. And we were actually working in tornado zones. And I mean, it was just
wow,
a little scary at times.
Yeah, and close calls with some real tornadoes coming through.
We were working on a road, and it was overcast and starting to drizzle a little bit, and we weren't using any lights. And I got a word from the generator operator that there was report of a lightning strike nearby, and he felt he should shut down the generator because if the lightning hits the generator, it'll go through the cable. And I said, shut it down. And so a little while later, Jan said, we need a light. Let's turn that light on. I said, the generator's not on. He said, why not? I said, because they reported a lightning strike nearby, and he felt it's safe to turn it off. And so I agreed. And he said, we have people for that. You don't do that. I said, yes, I do. And then the producer came running up and said, Jan, you're the one with deep pockets. You're the one that's going to... He said, okay. And he stormed off. And the rain let up, and it got clear, and he came back in dry clothes, and we continued the day. But it was just bizarre.
Good for you, Stan. That must have been a little scary.
Well, it's sometimes dealing with directors is like dealing with children. I have had 3 sons. And so you have to give them limits, like you do your kids. And then, like with your kids, they forget the limits, and then you have to remind them of the limits. Mm-hmm. And I've taken that on as my job.
Yep. Drawing those boundaries.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, knowing that they're going to probably, more than likely, exceed the boundaries.
What are some philosophies like that you would, maybe pass down to some of the, younger gaffers coming up and how they have to deal with some of the politics on set?
Timing is everything. You have to be careful. You don't want to put yourself in a position to get fired, especially if you need the job. But you do need to take into consideration reality and safety but timing, it's important when you make your suggestions or when you set your limits, and you try not to do it in front of a lot of people so that you don't embarrass the director, although sometimes you need to, like I did. But one of the things, on another subject, I think, nowadays people say uninformed and ignorant producers, we don't need lights, we're shooting HD. Well, you have to explain to them that lighting helps tell the story, just the way the costumes do and the set decoration, but it should be invisible. You don't want to take the audience out of the movie by doing something elaborate that, wow, no. Make it invisible. And the example I give is that you would light a hospital room differently if the patient is recovering than if the patient is dying. If the patient is recovering, there's sunlight coming through the window. You might hear birds chirping outside, and it's beautiful. But if they're dying, there's just some cold blue light coming from above. And, without even thinking about it, the audience is in the right mood for what's going to happen. But I read that actually in a biography of James Wong Howe that I read many years ago. It's really a wonderful book. And after I worked on Someone to Watch Over Me with Ridley Scott, which was quite an experience, I gave him a wrap gift at the end of this biography of James Wong Howe. So he sent me a really nice thank you note, and he said, "Are you trying to tell me something?" Which, of course, I was. And he has a million ideas, and half of them are really good, but half of them are not. And so we were playing good cop, bad cop, and so the ones that we didn't want, I said, "No, really, we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that.
We're going to do something else." But it was, and it's a great looking movie. It really is.
Yes. So Jim, what was one of your favorite films that you worked on?
Well, people ask me that a lot, and my favorite movie to have worked on was The Fisher King, and it was because of the collaboration between Terry Gilliam and Roger Pratt and the entire crew. All were a part of making that movie, and that's what made it such a joyful experience. And it was one of the most challenging movies as well. We were shooting in New York and L.A., and while we were scouting Grand Central Station in New York, Terry Gilliam said, "You know what would be great is if when Amanda and Robin go onto the main floor of the Grand Central, that everyone starts waltzing around the information booth," which, of course, was not in the script. And the two producers just jaws dropped because they could realize how much that might cost. But that's what we did. Mm. And there had been a New York gaffer who couldn't do it, and I ended up being the New York gaffer as well. And he had scouted with Roger Pratt, the DP, and they were going to put some 12K HMIs through these windows way at the top of the main room. And when Roger told me that, a really good gaffer had been there, and I said, "Oh, okay." But then we had 4 weeks of prep, and so when I wasn't prepping, I went back to Grand Central to just think about what to do there. And every time I went there, it looked bigger and bigger. So finally I came up with some ideas, and I said to Roger, I think we need a Musco light on the south side coming through the big window and the door as they enter. It's supposed to be 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but we were going to be shooting at midnight. And then we'll move the Musco light around to the west side when they get to the main floor. And he said, "How long will that take to move it?" So I said, 10 minutes. Because it's a self-contained unit. Yeah. You turn off the lights, you lower the boom, and you drive around and bring it back up again.
Right.
And thankfully, I had seen a movie that was shot in Grand Central Station not too long before, and I remembered thinking that the daylight coming in the window looked too cold based on how warm it was inside the place. So I put half CTO on the Musco light, and then behind every pillar that I could, I put lights. And then there was going to be a mirror ball on top of the information booth hit with a xenon. And so we had 2 xenons up on the balcony, the mezzanine, to light this mirror ball. And we did a rehearsal with Amanda Plummer working her way through the crowd. And quite often she would go out of light. And so I asked one of the electricians up by the xenon, who I didn't know, but I said, "Can you follow Amanda with a xenon as she walks through the crowd?" He said, "Sure." And he never missed once.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't look like she was in a follow spot or anything. It just looked like she never went out of the daylight coming through the window.
Brilliant.
So it's coming from the window side. And it's an amazing sequence that...
I have to go back and see this now again.
Well, but the movie holds up as well. But it's that sequence you would never imagine we were shooting at midnight. We were able to shoot from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and that's it. And... but it looks like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But it worked out well.
And using Muscos opposed to the other way to rig that probably saved a lot of time, I imagine, money, or no?
There was no other way to do it.
Yep. Just no other way to do it.
The light had to come from outside, and I guess you could have 6 condors with, 2 8. We didn't. There might have. I think there were only 12 Ks in probably. The Musco was ideal. And, because you can adjust the height so easily and the intensity and the spread, and it worked out really well.
So you went back to this location several times on your own to kind of think about this.
For sure.
Is it something that you do a lot?
I even now, I dream about what I'm doing and what I'm going to do, and sometimes, think of challenges and come up with solutions. And sometimes I go back to locations. And I think it's a good thing when you're scouting for anything, even a commercial. If you're doing a night shot, you usually scout in the daytime. that doesn't tell you very much. So, and when it's a whole group, you're not spending very much time at each location. So I always try to arrange for the DP and the key grip and me to go back and look at these locations at night, so we see what's there naturally and then see how much we have to add. And, on traffic, one of the things was when we were scouting locations, we didn't scout with the idea of where to put the lights, but do we need to use any lights? Because some, especially today, some locations, natural lighting is just perfect. And if you add light, you ruin it. And the introduction of Michael Douglas in Traffic is this huge courtroom in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we didn't use any lights.
Wow.
And the windows faced north, so we didn't get a lot of sun that changed everything. It was nice soft light coming in, lighting the whole courtroom. And there you go, ready.
Ready to go.
Yeah. It used to be available light was every light available.
Right.
But now it can actually be available light.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily go into a scouter situation thinking, I'm going to bring a bunch of lights. So you're going to look at the existing lighting and see how you can minimize
For sure.
the package.
And what that does, though, is production managers realize right away that you're not ordering anything just in case.
Right.
You're only ordering what you need. And so if you ask for something, they say yes, because they know you wouldn't ask for it unless you needed it.
Right.
And that's a great position to be in.
Yeah, and it probably also helps with you getting called back.
I think it does.
And so you've been through a lot of change in technology, and even more so in the past probably 8 years. The pace of acceleration is definitely here. And so what are some of the changes you see nowadays with LEDs compared to the way you shoot movies in the past with a lot more tungsten and HMI? Good or bad? How do you see that change?
Well, I don't use anything just because it's new, but when I see how it's working and it's working well, then I start to use it. But my packages of lights are quite a bit of old tungsten lights, but quite a bit of new LEDs as well. And I mix them together. And, sky panels and light panels and all those things are wonderful. And they make things faster and easier, and because they're smaller and lighter. But sometimes a 10K is a good tool to have, or a baby. I like to use Lowell sockets with R40 mushroom globes with a hood on them, and you can tape it to the ceiling or clip it on a pole or something for night scenes for nice warm tungsten light, and you put it on a variac to make it even warmer. And but it's getting harder and harder because they're not making as many tungsten lights as they used to. And,
Right.
I ordered some the other day, and they said we don't carry those anymore. And
What?
And I ordered some hoods for these R40s, and they said we threw them all away. I said, why? So a gaffer from Pittsburgh heard that I was looking for them, and he sent me a half a dozen hoods for R40s.
Oh, that's nice.
No, it was amazingly nice. And I said, how much do I owe you? He said, no, it's fine. Thank you very much. And oh my gosh.
Who's the gaffer? Remind me. Out of Pixar, is it? It wouldn't be John Morrison, Momo.
No, it was.
It was Momo. It's the only gaffer I know in that city.
Yeah, maybe the only gaffer there, but yeah, that's who it was. Absolutely.
He's a great guy.
Absolutely. Another quick story. When I got into the union in 1967, your application had to be signed by two people in the union recommending you for membership. And so there was a gaffer named Earl Gilbert, who was my father's best boy on a number of...
Oh, really? He's a legend.
So I called and I said, will you sign my union application? He said, oh, of course. And he was shooting The Graduate at the time at the Ambassador Hotel. Oh. And so I went over to the Ambassador, and he signed my application. And then last year at the NAB show, I saw his son-in-law, Pat Grossvent, and he knows that Earl was close with my dad and everything. And I said, I don't seem to have Earl's phone number. And so he gave me Earl's phone number. And so I was in Arizona thinking about The Greatest Story, because that's where they shot. and they were playing The Graduate on television that night. So I said, I got to call Earl.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I explained to my wife that, Earl signed my union papers in 1967.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I called Earl and I said, hello, Earl, it's Jim Planette. And he said, oh, it's great to hear from you. My gosh, I remember I signed your union papers.
How did you
I
remember
can
that?
remember that, but how did he remember that? Or why, But, and then I recently had lunch with him at his house. He's about to turn 93.
Wow.
But he should be at one of these
Yes.
podcasts because he has so many stories. It was so wonderful to spend time with him. And listen.
We'll definitely have to try to take you up on getting his info.
Yeah, 'cause it was. I really.
He's a legend.
Oh,
He's a legend.
absolutely. I mean,
I'm surprised that he best for your dad. I didn't know that.
well, he was on a rigging crew at 20th Century Fox for 17 years. And he came to my dad and he said, I've been on a rigging crew for 17 years. I want to be a gaffer. Will you help me? My dad said, of course, got him on the show he was doing at the time. And then he became his best boy and was best boy on a number of movies, including The Greatest Story Ever Told. And then he became a gaffer. And it just...
Well, your dad has such a profound effect on him. I think that's why he remembers signing your card, I think.
that's right. But other gaffers came to my dad and said, you're making a mistake. He'll take a job away from you one day. My dad said, there's plenty of jobs. Come on, you got to help the young guys.
Oh, good for him.
Of course.
Yeah.
And everybody helped me when I was coming up. And every show I worked on, I'd ask the gaffer or the DP, may I watch dailies? And they said, oh, of course. So at lunchtime, we'd go to dailies, and I'd remember what we'd done the day before and then saw what the result was, either good or bad. And that's how you learn.
Yeah.
That's probably why I was able to move up so quickly.
Yep, because you got help and you got to give back.
For sure. Yeah. So I, always encourage people on my crew to, ask questions and quite often I ask them questions. Why are we doing this? Then I explain to them why we're doing it. Oh, I see. And that'll help them later on.
So you've been working with the same Best Boy and crew for some time, or you've moved around on that?
Well, because I travel out of town so much, it's hard to keep the same crew because when I come back, then they're working on something else. And
Right.
So I've worked with a lot of different people, but and some of them are retired. How about that?
Yeah.
But Michael the cellist and Joe Capshaw were both regular crew members.
Oh,
for
great.
me. And, Joe Capshaw was on ER for 15 years or something. And Michael the cellist has been retired and now is traveling with his wife and having a wonderful retirement. Well, I'm having a wonderful retirement too, but I get to work periodically, which is really great.
Which is really great.
Yeah.
A lot of gaffers that I know and kind of grew up with are sort of retiring now, and there's a whole new generation of gaffers. What do you think, if you could give these young kids one piece of advice to help them out in their careers, what do you think that would be?
Well, the best advice I ever had was from my dad when I was a kid visiting a set. And I looked up at the green bed and I saw all these lights. And I said, how do you know where to put all the lights? And he said, well, the first thing, you have to learn to look at light. And then when you look at light, when you're driving in a car, when you're riding on a bus, in a plane, whatever, you have an image in your mind, and then you just can recreate it much easier. And that's the best advice I ever had.
Yeah, and it sounds very simple, but it's not that obvious when you're working with artificial light all the time. You're so enthralled with that you fail to kind of stop, smell the flowers, and look at light everywhere you go. Jill's my mentor from K56 was into that too. He told me you just pay attention to light and natural light.
Right.
And then because what you just said is trying to be invisible is one of the brilliant pieces of advice that you're given.
And when you're setting up a shot and there's a window, you try to set the camera in such a position that the actors are looking toward the window, so they're looking toward the light, because the best light, key light, is from the side of the camera to which they're looking.
Right.
And then the side of the face that you see the most is the fill side, and that determines the drama of the scene, whether there's a lot of fill or no fill or in between. But looking toward the key light is is a good thing. And I like 3/4 backlights. If you look at E.T., it's almost all 3/4 backlight.
Yeah.
But that makes the fill side right on the camera side, so.
Brilliant. So you do have a style.
Minimal.
Minimal style.
But, and it's that making it invisible is the same as cinema minima. It really is.
Maybe you can't say this, but some of your favorite DPs to work with.
No, I can. And it turns out I do about 6 or 7 movies with a DP, then we move on. But Steven Soderbergh certainly is one of my favorites. Robert Elswood is one of my favorites. Even though I only did one movie with Alan Dabbio, it was just a wonderful experience, and I still see him periodically. He's living at the Motion Picture Home now, but it's still fun to go by and see him once in a while.
Yeah.
John Toll is certainly one of my favorites. And lately, I've been working with younger DPs. I did a movie called A Single Man with Edu Grau from Spain. And it was his first feature in the United States, and he was interviewing a number of gaffers, and he asked me how I would light a night scene at the beach. And so I said, well, with a condor and one big light. And anyway, he offered me the job. And I said, I'd love to do it, thank you. I said, how old are you? And he said, 29. I said, I've got suits older than that. But I've done 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 movies with him, and he's got a wonderful eye. He's a terrific DP. He's got a movie coming out that I just saw a trailer for, and as I watched the trailer, I thought, I wish he didn't do such good work without me, because it really looks good. I was at the ASC Awards, and they gave a thing called the Neon Award, which was to low-budget movies, and they showed a clip from one called Concrete Nights from Finland, and the DP on that got the award. And then 6 months later or something, I got this call that I want to work with Peter Flinkenberg from Finland on this movie in Eureka, California. And I remembered the name, and I said, oh, absolutely. And so we did this movie in Eureka, which didn't get very good reviews, but every review mentioned how great the movie looked. And then just very recently, we did a Tier 1 project in Mobile, Alabama, called Lansky, with Harvey Keitel playing Meyer Lansky.
Oh, wow.
Who is just unbelievably good. And I think it's going to be a really good movie. It's about a writer interviewing Meyer Lansky to write a book. And Lansky says, I'll tell you the truth if you promise not to publish this book until I die.
Wow.
And the director's father had interviewed the real Meyer Lansky, and that was the provision.
Wow.
And so...
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
No, for sure. And so he's talking to this writer, and then there are flashbacks to the stories that he's telling, which is rather challenging because we flash back to 1928, 1932, 1942, and all done in Mobile, Alabama, which is supposed to be Miami, Florida, which surprisingly, there's many, many places there that look just like Miami, Florida.
How about that?
I'd never been to Mobile. It's a beautiful city, and I had a really good young crew. But I find in doing these low-budget movies that everybody's there for the right reason, to make a good movie.
That's brilliant. So you don't own a truck or
No.
a bunch of gear? I've noticed that you're one of the few that really don't take advantage of the economics of it.
Well, 100 years ago, an old guy that I came up with, Colin Campbell,
Oh yeah, of course.
he said, I'm going to buy some equipment. You want to be partners on the equipment? And so I said, no, thank you. Because I felt it was almost a conflict of interest. If you owned 4 ARCs, you'd put 4 ARCs on the list, whether you needed them or not. And I didn't want to be in that position. And also, when you first buy equipment, you get a loan to buy the equipment. And then you need to keep renting that equipment to pay the loan. And so if you're offered a job where you can't rent your equipment, you have to say no. And so Colin turned down some good movies for that reason. And there's some good movies that I've made that maybe I wouldn't have been able to if I'd had a big loan to pay off.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So I own a little bit of equipment now, LED stuff, Geminis and light mats and stuff.
They're small enough to manage. You don't need a big truck for them.
And I don't have a truck.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes part of my package, and it works out very well.
Good for you.
But it's also stuff that I would order whether I owned it or not, which is what I want to do.
Yep. And you're not so invested in them that you don't necessarily have to use them for every show.
It's not $100,000 worth of equipment, right?
Right. So, Jim, wow, very honored for you to come in. Thank you so much for always supporting us here at MacAm. You did some really good interviews with us early on. We appreciate you, and I'm sure the audience appreciates all your advice. And
it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to see you again soon. Hopefully, we can have you back. There's going to be a lot more. You've done all this in your career. What's next? I mean, what are you going to do now? Are you going to keep on going, or are you going to be a DP, or are you going to...
Well, no, that's an interesting question, because I'm asked that a lot. And, I probably could have done Halloween 6 instead of Braveheart, but I think I made the right choice.
Yeah. Right, that's right. Good for you. All right, Jim Planette, guys, legend amongst gaffers. We'll see you on the next episode of The Lamp Doc.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.